Hi everyone and welcome back to a new episode of VWD. Today we're gonna learn how to code a clock app. And this will simply display the time on our screen as you can see. But on top of that, it will be also a little bit responsive. So if we open a new window, the time still fits the previous window, which now is a little bit smaller. And as you can see, we can keep doing this. If you're new to this channel or you're back watching this video, do not forget you can find timestamps in the video description below. And all the code that you're gonna see in this episode is available on GitHub, link in the video description below. And now, without further ado, let's get started. Before jumping straight into coding, let's go to the board to make sure that we fully understand how the algorithm is gonna work. As a first step, we're gonna get the time, and right after, we're gonna display it to the screen. Then, as step 3, we're gonna wait for 1 second. Then, we're gonna update the time by adding 1 second, and right after, we're gonna go back to step number 2. Pretty easy, right? Let's see now a toy example. First, we're gonna retrieve the time, and at step 2, we're gonna immediately display. So for example here, let's suppose it's 49 past 17. Then we're gonna wait for 1 second, and right after, update the time and display it. And of course, we're gonna keep doing this till the user shuts down the program. Alright, hopefully we are on the same page, and now it's time for coding this. Let's start from step number 1. Here we're gonna get the time somehow and save it into the time variable. But how can we do this? How can we get the local time? But luckily for us, also this time Python has a simple solution. From the datetime module, we're gonna import the datetime class. And now what we can do is to call the today method to retrieve the local time. Now let's run the program in an interactive way in the window below so we can check it out. As you can see, if we write down the time variable and press enter, we get a weird output. This might be confusing, but it's just an instance of the datetime class. And to better understand it, we can just print it out. Way better, right? So what we can see is that on the very right part, there is the time. As you can see, we can read the hour, the minute, the second, and even the milliseconds. On the left part instead, we can read the date, specifically year, month, and day. Alright, now back to the code, we can immediately do step number 2. Here, we're gonna simply print the content of the time variable. At step 3, we're gonna have to wait for 1 second, and as we've seen in episode number 2 of this series, to get this done, we can use the sleep function from the time module. Now, to test whether this works or not, let's write down a print statement right after the sleep function. And now, let's give it a try in the window below. Let's wait for 1 second, and here we go, the print statement is displayed and the program has just exited. Now, let's move ahead with step number 4. Here, we're gonna add 1 second to the time variable. And for doing this, we're gonna import the timedelta class from the datetime module. Let's create an instance of it and assign it a value of 1 second, and then we can simply add it to the time variable using the plus operator, exactly like we do with numbers. And now let's check it out if this works or not. Let's write down a print statement right after, and let's test the code in the window below. Alright, as you can see, the time displayed in the 2 lines is not identical. In the first line, the number of seconds is 23. Whereas in the second one is 24. And this is exactly what we want, a 1 second difference. Back to the code, let's move ahead with step number 5. This is gonna be pretty simple. We have just to write down a while cycle, and the condition here is gonna be true. And that's because we want the program to keep running unless the user stops it. Alright, and now let's give it a go. Great, as you can see the program works. However, there are a couple of things that we have to figure out. First off, the screen is not updated. As you can see, the program displays line after line. Second, we can read both the time and the date, and even the milliseconds. Instead, we are just interested in the time alone. So let's back to the code to sort them out. Let's start from the first one. Here, we're gonna import the US module, and then use the system function. Exactly like we've done in episode number 2 of this series. Next, let's get the time. First, we're gonna convert time into a string using the str function, and then apply the split method. In this way, we're gonna get a list out of it. Element 0 is gonna be the date, whereas element 1 is gonna be the time. So, if we wanna get the time, we have just to pass 1 between square brackets. And now, let's check it out in the window below. Great! As we can see, the screen is updated, and we are displaying only the time. What's left to do now is to drop the milliseconds. But this is gonna be pretty easy. As you can see, the milliseconds are found after the dot. So what we have to do here is just to use the split method another time, and we're gonna pass dot as a separator. And here we go, the app works. Before we can consider this done though, we have to make the time displayed a little bit bigger. Alright, let's see how we can get this done. As you can see, I've just zoomed out because I want to show you something. Here I've just added two new variables which are gonna hold the values that we're gonna display on the screen. So first of all we have the separator variable, which contains a colon, and then we have the numbers variable. As you can see, this is a list. Each element here is a string containing the number that we want to display. And on top of that, the numbers are sorted. That's because we want to make our life easier. So for example, if we want to get 0 out of it, we are just gonna take the element at index 0. If we want to get 5 instead, we're gonna take the element at position 5. Finally, up here we have a function called parse. I'm not gonna explain how the code works. That's because I think that after 8 episodes of this series, you are good enough to figure that out yourself. However, if you give it a try and you don't understand it, don't worry, just write down in the comment section below any doubt or question and I will answer right back. Alright, now back to our function, let's see what this does. As you can read in the docstring of the function, this simply strips out the empty spaces that are found in the input that we are passing, and in our case this is gonna be both the separator and the numbers. To better understand this, let's have a look at the separator variable. As we can see, here there is empty space, and when we pass a string like this to the parse function, we're gonna remove the empty space. So the content of the separator variable is gonna go from this to this. So now you may ask, but what's the point of all of this? The parse function has been written because we want to avoid to do this work manually. So every time that we change either the separator or the numbers, we just want to copy and paste. We don't want to waste our time removing empty spaces. That is going to be the parse function's duty. And now let's work this out. First, we're going to apply the parse method to both the numbers and the separator variables. Next, let's refactor the time variable declaration. This time, time is gonna be equal to an empty list. And you may wonder, but why do we have to do this? That's because we wanna display each number next to each other on the same line. So if this is the first time for you trying to do that, I highly suggest that you go and check episode number 6 of this series before moving ahead with the rest of this video. And now let me open a Python interactive shell in the window below, so I can show you some nice trick. From the datetime module, let's import datetime. And now let's use the today method. Now, if you are interested in getting out the time only, and specifically the hour, we can simply do that by calling the hour attribute. Pretty nice, right? And exactly the same applies for the minutes and the seconds. And now let's see how this can help us back in our program. In the time variable, we're gonna store the numbers and the separators that we have to display. And the first number that we're gonna display is the hour. So let's see how we can add each digit of the hour to the time variable. First of all, we're gonna convert the hour into a string, and then iterate over each digit using a for cycle. At each iteration, we're gonna convert the digit into an integer. That's because we wanna retrieve the digit from the numbers variable. However, indexes in a list must be passed as an integer, and not as a string. Finally, when we are done with the for cycle, we're gonna add the separator to the time variable. Pretty easy, right? However, we must not forget that when the hour is lower than 10, then we're gonna add 0 before the digit itself. Great, and this is exactly the same sequence of action that we should also do with minutes and seconds. So instead of repeating this 3 times in total, let's just write down a function. As you can see, the code in the function body is exactly equal to the code that we've just written. But now we're gonna call this function instead. Way better like this, right? Let's do the exact same thing also for minutes and seconds. Great, and now let's display the numbers next to each other. First, we're gonna need the total number of lines in each digit. And notice how the code here works only if the total number of lines is the same for each digit. Next, let's define the display variable as an empty string. Right after, we're gonna iterate over the number of lines. And for each digit, we're gonna add the corresponding line. And do not forget to add an empty space between each digit. Finally, when we are done with the line, we're gonna add a new line character. Now let's not forget to update stat number 2, and then let's give it a try. And here we go, it works. And by the way, if you're wondering why it's already 5 PM, that's not an error, it's simply because I've recorded this video in multiple sessions. Great, what we're left to do with now is just to make sure that the time is displayed at the center of the screen. And to figure this out, let's go back to the board. To display the time in the middle of the screen, let's think about it as a box. Then what we can do is to measure the distance between the box and the top of the screen, and also the box and the left boundary. Once we have measured them, then displaying the box is pretty easy. Let's start with the distance from the top. Here we can draw two lines. The yellow one is going to be the screen height, and the red one the number's height, or if you prefer, the box height. Then calculating the distance from the top is really easy. This is simply going to be the difference between the two height divided by 2. In a similar way, we can figure out the distance from the left. Let's draw both the screen and the numbers width. Here, however, we need two additional lines. The purple line is going to be the number width, and the green line is going to be the distance between two digits. Now we can approximate the box width. As you can see, this is just an approximation. For example, we're not counting for the separator itself, but let's just keep it simple for this program. So finally here, the distance from the left is simply going to be the difference between the screen and the box width divided by 2. Alright, and now let's implement this back in our code. First off, let's start by calculating the width and the height of the screen. And this is pretty easy. We're gonna use the getTerminalSize function to retrieve both the number of lines and columns. Next, let's get the number width. And now we have everything we need. First of all, we're gonna add to the display variable as many new line characters as the distance from the top. And next, when we are iterating over the lines, before adding the very first digit, we're gonna add the distance from the left. Finally, let's not forget to update the distance between two digits. So I've coded these formulas pretty fast, but I'm confident that you can figure out everything by yourself. Still, if you have any question or doubt, just write it down in the comment section below. Alright, we are finally ready to go. Great, we got it right! Okay, we have finally come to the end of this video. If you have any question or feedback, just write it down in the comment section below. Do not forget to give it a like and subscribe to the channel to not miss next week's episode. In the meantime, if you wanna do more, just check the GitHub repo where you can find the next steps for this exercise. And with that said, see you in the next one. Ciao!